Okay, welcome everyone. I'm going to give another minute or two for others to join us.
Perhaps at this time you might type maybe your first name and where you are in the chat, so I kind of get a sense of who's in the audience. And it looks like I need to turn the chat on again. There we go. Izzy. And Sherry's from Connecticut. 2 Connecticut people. 3 Connecticut people. Okay. West Virginia, New Jersey. And Hannah. The only instructions right now is to perhaps type your name and where you're located, just so I have a sense of how widespread our audience is. Because right now I'm seeing about 30 people.
Yep, there's still a few joining. I'm going to wait one more minute.
Yeah. Texas, New Jersey. All right.
Okay. Hi everyone, just waiting another maybe 30 seconds to see if some others want to join us. Alan has requested that you, if you can, put your first name and your location in the chat box. He likes to know where his audience is.
Well, it looks like the names come up automatically, apparently. So whether you type your name also and where you're from. Kentucky, first one. Turkey, fantastic. I've been to Istanbul and a variety of several times, but to several cities in Turkey many years ago.
Yeah, okay.
We're now officially international then.
Yes, we are.
Someone from Turkey.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. Don't want to delay any longer. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Debbie Pruno, the Administrative Director for Future Problem Solving Program International. And as you can see, we're going to be utilizing the chat feature today. So you may want to keep that window open for easy access. And I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Dr. Robert Allen Black. Allen began his creative life journey in 1976 after reading 2 articles written by Dr. E. Paul Torrance. Allen was a volunteer at Plamosa Elementary School in Delray Beach, Florida, when he began his Ventures Unlimited for 23 gifted students from kindergarten to 5th grade. One of the 3rd graders was Allen's son, Jeff. He then met Bob Eberly, a creative education consultant who created the most used creative thinking tool named Scamper. Eberly convinced Allen to attend CPSI in Buffalo to learn more about how to generate creative ideas. And welcome, Allen. Thank you for sharing your presentation with us today.
Thank you very much, Debbie. I'm hearing all kinds of voices. So I have a little echo, I guess. Anyway, welcome to Allen's Creativity Room. Some people would call it chaotic. I call it clustered, meaning that I pretty much can find things. They're just not in alphabetical or numerical order. And it varies from props that you can see on the top shelf and some of the other shelves, or boxes of various things. Today, I'm going to share one tool of many. It's a particular tool I helped create years ago after learning many others. So give me a minute or two to share a little bit about my background. We go to the next slide and show a photographic history of my life from the age of about 4 or 5 to the bottom right of a few years ago. I've been a fairly active individual, kind of a loner much of the time, But since I got into creativity, I became very involved in many organizations around the country. One of our presidents, who I got to shake hands with, you can see above the word president, Jimmy Carter, one of the ones I have great respect for. And we'll move on to my professional life, to the next slide. In 1960, at the age of 16, I was paid to do some cartooning and to create signs for a restaurant that most of the high school kids at my high school hung out at by the high school. But in the last 60 years, I've had 50 jobs, ranging from one that lasted a day long, it actually meant to last a day long, on up to what I've been doing, which you're about to see me do for the last 40 years. So if we move on to the next slide, I have the 8 basic careers I've worked in. The longest, of course, was as a creative thinking consultant. But my original dream was to be a cartoonist, but I didn't think my parents would pay for me to go to cartooning school. So I went into architecture and became very happy with that. Did that for a few years, then became a graphic designer. I worked as a TV news writer while I was in college, became a college professor eventually, interior designer for a while, and a freelance writer. So in other words, I've had quite a mixed background, which is not unusual for people of a certain type of creative people. So we can move on to the next slide. And for the last 43 years, I've traveled around the world many times. This montage just represents one trip that lasted roughly 100 days. Now, we'll move into the topic for this 30 minutes by finding out a little bit about you. This is why we need the chat group again. I want you to look at these 4 shapes and pick the one out of those 4 and that you like the most, and just type that into the chat. This will give me a little information about you, and I'll share what they basically mean. This is a very quick way of doing it. So just quickly type in which of those 4 shapes: square, circle, triangle, or a squiggle, or macaroni noodle. All right. No one seems to be typing yet. Now, hopefully I haven't lost everybody.
I am seeing some responses.
Oh, okay. I'm not here. I don't know why. Maybe I need to click another button. No? Anyway, I'll explain what they mean. This is a test I found many years ago when I became interested in how do you understand the differences between people. When I taught with the kids, the 20 through academically gifted children, I noticed that they weren't all the same. One, they didn't have the same interest. I had one, John, who was a kindergartner who was fascinated by rocks. And I don't mean just pretty little rocks of different sizes and shapes. He knew the strata. He knew the scientific term for them. I had a migrant worker's son who loved horses. Well, it turns out every morning, 5 days a week before he came to school, he was out working with the horses in the fields. But all the other 21 kids all had various interests. So that became interesting to me. I found this little questionnaire. There are many of these. They range from 9 questions to 200 questions. But in this case, people who usually choose the square are fairly logical people who like things factual, precise, and accurate. The people who choose the triangle generally like things to be organized, and if I was looking in their bedroom, it would be organized, structured. They can find things very easily. The circle are people who just like being around other people, and usually you don't see them walking down the hallway by themselves. They're walking with other people all the time. And the squiggle, which is me, I'm in like a giant squiggle. These are people who have multiple interests and the interests change. They start hundreds of projects, but don't always finish them because they run out of time. But generally, they'll finish the ones they promise to other people. So it would give me an idea of what you're like, and not knowing your ages and so forth. So let's go on to the actual technique that I want to share in the time I have. First of all, as Debbie said, I met this man named Bob Everly, and I'll show his system in a minute. But he told me about this SIPSI conference. Paul Torrance was one of the first founders. That's a photograph of him and I on my graduation day in 1984, and the logo for the Creative Education Foundation on the top, and a graphic I found that kind of represents the way some of our minds work. But I became fascinated by these tools and techniques I was learning at this conference. And though I'm not overly organized, I like to have some sense of order. And I had learned by that time the value of using acronyms as memory tools. So I created this one, what's something we collect? And the word stamps came, and I chose to use it as an acronym to represent 6 different types of creative thinking tools or things we can use. One, systems, like the creative problem solving process that Alex Osborne and Sid Parnes created that you learn through the Future Problem Solving program. But then there are tools and techniques like brainstorming and Scamper and many others. And there are different approaches that can be defined in a variety of ways. It could be do it alone, do it with a partner, do it with a team, do it with a large group, do it over the internet as we're doing nowadays because of COVID. And then there are methods, processes, and strategies. So let's look at the tool that we mentioned already, Scamper. Bob Everly created this to help children of different ages learn how to generate ideas quickly. And he thought of different things, approaches, and he came up with this idea of Scamper. It was a word that kind of came to mind when he thought of the kindergarten students or younger students he worked with, that they like to scamper around. And in fact, rather than brainstorming, which was a popular word and technique at the time, still is, he decided to come up with this one called Scamper. And each represents a different way of approaching a challenge or a problem: substituting, combining, adapting or altering, magnify, minify, multiply, put to other uses, eliminate, or reverse. The key issue about that, they all are verbs or action words. And the message he was trying to share was that we can become more creative by changing our actions, our movements, our verbs, our activities. So let's go to the tool that I brought along called Alphabetizing. Both of these, Scamper and Alphabetizing, fit a general category that you'll find when you read books like Thinker Toys by a friend of mine named Michael McCulco. It is like an encyclopedia of creative thinking tools. There's a general category called checklisting. And what you do is you have a list of questions. Alex Osborne had a list of 83 questions. Bob Everly had a list of 7 verbs that you use. And now I'm offering this one, Alphabetizing, using the alphabet. And I've actually used this in different countries where the alphabets don't match ours, like in Turkey or in France, or when it gets into Chinese or Asian characters. So here's how it works. We'll move to the next slide. And this is where I want you to work in the chat box again. I'm going to see if I can get mine to work better. Is that you alphabetize different things. Like one time when you're generating ideas, you might alphabetize professions, like architect, zookeeper, or occupations, which are difference between profession and occupations is that basically with the profession, you have to have college degrees and licenses, or you might use famous people or heroes or superheroes like the various ones that are in the movies now and are so popular. So what I'm asking you to do in the next 3 to 4 minutes, and Debbie will give you the clue when the time runs up. I want you to choose one of these or perhaps another list you want to use and see if you can fill an alphabet of them, such as A for architect, B for baker, C for chemist, D for dentist, and so forth. And that's your first assignment, is come up with a list as many of 26 as you can come up with, and you have 3 minutes to do it. And please share at least samples of them in the chat.
Alan, as
Yes.
we are working, I just want to make sure, is your chat working? Can you see it now?
It's not adding anything to it. The last thing I see is Trevor from Connecticut is here. Oh, wait. I didn't click on the red button. Aha, there it is. I'm seeing architect and I'm seeing civil engineer and watermelon and Elon Musk. Yes, it is working right now. Great. Thank you. I hadn't noticed the red box.
Okay.
I don't have Superman eyesight, so I have to move in once in a while. All right. Aha. Quite a variety. That makes it even better. And if I remember right, Tom Brady's in sports. I'm not much of a sports follower like my son is. Ah, Daredevil. Okay, that's. I have a good friend who is a professional dog walker. She has a successful company and has lots of people that work with her. All right. Okay, how are we doing on time, Debbie?
1 more minute.
All right, thank you.
Okay, the time's up.
All right. You can keep typing those if you want, but right now we want to move on because we want to use them. Now, Deborah, we can go to the next slide. And this is the challenge. You will have 5 minutes to work on this, is to use your list, your alphabetized list, as experts you would call on. For instance, you're trying to come up with the ideas for a classroom of the future, and you thought, what would an architect do? How might a baker help? How might a dentist? How might an X-ray specialist? These may seem silly at times, but sometimes the skills and abilities and knowledge that they have might be able to help us create new ideas. Because what we're looking at are ideas, not solutions. Because I've learned years ago that the sillier the idea, the easier it is to turn it into something serious, rather than a serious idea trying to make it highly creative. So I gave you 5 minutes. Once again, as you start coming up with ideas, type them in the chat box. And then we'll stop when Debbie gives you the warning. She'll give you a warning at 1 minute. And then we'll look at some of your ideas and see what you've come up with in just a short period of time. Field trips to outer space like last week would be fantastic. Some of Dr. Torrance's writings went up in space a couple times. Sadly, one time was the Challenger when the teacher took them up. And unfortunately, that horrible accident when the rocket exploded. Ah, role playing. Great. Oh, totally agree with you, Kathy, on the biochemist one about finding a way to protect against these viruses. There have been, one thing I have learned, if I've learned much in the last couple months with what's happened in our country, is that there have been many viruses, but none of them have ever gone as wild and as widespread as this one. So much needs to be learned. Aha, Baker. One class I found interesting in elementary school was they put the boys in home ec and they took the girls and put them into shop. And while we were in home ec, we were learning how to bake. The other boys and I were learning how to bake and do a variety of things. Ah, yes, definitely. Safe teaching environments. Definitely agree with you, Joy, on the cartoonist. And the nurses, so many thousands of nurses are helping people now. A couple of friends of mine who are nurses have been working very hard the last 2 months here in Athens.
Okay, let's go another minute.
All right, thank you, Debbie.
Okay, Alan, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. A lot of excellent ideas, very creative that we could put to work. Not remembering what my next slide looks like. Hang on one second. All right. Stop there and put the focus on that. That tells me it's time to not necessarily wrap up, but at least talk about a few things. Purpose of tools and techniques is that not everybody feels creative 8 hours a day or 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that was what fascinated me back in 1978 when I went and I attended 25 different 90-minute sessions about different tools, techniques, systems, strategies, and so forth, that I could use these. I was an architect at the time and graphic designer. And Monday morning, you walk in at 8:30 or 9, and all of a sudden you find out that the owner of the firm says you have to have a report ready for the client at 10 o'clock. Well, all of a sudden you've got to be very creative, very quick. Well, in reality, that's what Alex Osborne, who created brainstorming and started the Creative Education Foundation and the annual conference. This year, by the way, is also being virtually done this week and next week. But it was so that people could have a tool that could help them spark their brain to be more creative at the moment and not wait until they felt more creative. In alphabetizing, I found I can use it with bankers, I can use it with lawyers, I can use it with artists and teachers. They'll come up with different kinds of ideas, but they'll come up with ideas very quickly by using that tool. Then I introduce something like brainstorming or Scamper or some of the others. Because one of the things also I've studied and worked with all these years is that we all have our own creative thinking style. Some of us are more logical, like the squares. Some of us are more, we want to do it with other people. We don't want to do it alone. So we're more circles. And then there's some of the triangles who like very systematic approaches. And you put a high triangle and a high squiggle together, and if they get to understand each other and appreciate each other, they can be phenomenal. But until then, they can really be disruptive with each other, criticizing each other's ideas. And I think of some of the squiggles that I've read about or met, people like Steve Jobs from Apple was definitely a squiggle, but he was also a secondary triangle. Walt Disney, same thing. He was an extreme squiggle in some aspects of his life, but also very focused on being a triangle or organized, and people so forth. I want to share one more in the remaining few minutes on the next slide. What next? There are many techniques that no doubt your teachers or sponsors for the future problem-solving programs that you're in will teach you about the creative problem-solving process of the various versions over the years. The one that I truly learned was the 6th step that spelled out the word of Pisa, and now is down to like a 4-step different process that the Creative Problem-Solving Institute teaches. But then there are many other methods. I have one called creating. It's a little different. More whole brain, I believe. But then there are other people who have 8 steps and so forth. But here's another way I find when I have a challenge, whether it's something personal in my home or something in my life, like the various challenges we're all having at different ages with the COVID, is I call it elsing. What else could I do? Where else might I do it? When else? Why else? Who else might I do it with? Or who else might I call? And how else might I do it? As I keep stressing for opening myself up to many more possibilities. Even like today, it's a beautiful day here in Athens. We're east of Atlanta, about 40 to 60 miles, depending on what part of the city. And the weather looks beautiful. Is I probably will want to go out and walk. We're under a stay at home, but not permanently. We just are asked to stay safe distance like many other places. But I'll be thinking about where else can I do it today that will be more interesting to me and maybe more inspirational. So I want to thank you very much. I hope you found this interesting. I highly recommend that you find the book Think or Toys, or if you will write to me, and let's see, how do we get that best in the screen? That's going to be best. We have a write on? No, it's rather simple. Alan, A-L-A-N, like it is on my shirt, left brain, right brain, color. A-L-A-N, at, then CRE8NG.com. And I will send you an ebook version of my book, Broken Crayons, which talks about things like this, about how to know how creative you are and the fact that you can become more creative all of your life. And it gives some samples. There, thank you for typing that in, Debbie. But the book is divided up in such, first of all, the first section is, are you creative? My statement immediate is, everyone is born with capacities to think creatively. Unfortunately, as I've learned through 93 countries that I've traveled through and worked in, and others I've read about, have a tendency to quiet it down by the 4th grade. Dr. Torrance spent many years studying that with millions of students, literally millions of students around the world, that he found that when he measured their creativeness when they were kindergartners to when they were fourth graders, now 9 or 10, that their scores had changed and dropped. It's not that the creative ability isn't there, it's just not being asked for or rewarded. There's only a few of us who stand out and are weird by some standards, who always score high. But I hope you enjoyed this and had some fun. As I said, if you can send it to either Debbie or my email, I will send out the ebook for my book called Broken Crayons, and it'll give you more of what we just shared. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you everyone for attending.